Here we are. So again, my name is Father Rocco Popolo. I'm the co-chair of Pax Christi, and I welcome you to this special event. We have 4 panelists tonight who will be sharing some perspectives on the situation in Palestine. So the order which we'll have them present, the first one will be Muna Kaldoui Killingback. She's a Palestinian Catholic who holds a master's degree in international relations, a graduate certificate in human rights, and is a PhD student at UMass, Boston, in global governance and human security program. Her research areas include faith-based advocacy, critical feminist peace building. Muna has worked with women's organizations for most of her career, including 10 years with the World YWCA and YWCA's international headquarters in Geneva. She's currently co-chair of the Palestinian Christian Alliance for Peace, which seeks to mobilize the American Christian community to advocate for Palestinian rights and works with Christian, Jewish, and Muslim partners to achieve peace with justice and equality and dignity for all who live in the Holy Land. Muna lives in Milton, Massachusetts. Following Muna's presentation will be that of Dr. Philip Herrick, my co-chair of Pax Christi, Massachusetts. He taught in public high schools for over 30 years and holds a doctorate in social justice education. He co-authored Living in the Company of Jesus, a practical scripture-based guide to deepening your journey within his nonviolent kingdom, with his late brother, Father Simon Herrick, SJ, who traveled widely through the Middle East in support of peace. Philip lives in Southampton, Massachusetts. The third person will be Jan Leary.
Up there. Way up, okay. Point 1.
Excuse me, can we mute ourselves, please, if we're not speaking? Please mute.
The third person, it will be Jan Leary, who's the leader of Pax Christi Metro West local group and who holds a master's degree and a PhD in psychology from BC and an MDiv from Andover Newton Seminary. And she has had multiple workshops on the Christian-based Steadfast Hope program to help Americans understand the Palestinian quest for just peace through a series of readings, videos, and discussions. She's the co-founder of the New England Network for Justice in Palestine and a member of the National Board of If Americans Knew. She spent 25 years in progressive Catholic endeavors, Call to Action, Catholic Organizations for Renewal, and Voice of the Faithful. She's a mother of 3 wonderful daughters, a grandmother of 3 amazing grandchildren. And then lastly, we'll have Scott Schaefer Duffy, who's a graduate of the College of the Holy Cross. He's co-leader with his wife, Claire, of the St. Francis and St. Therese, a Catholic worker house in Worcester, where they publish the Catholic Radical newsletter. They've been active in the Catholic worker movement for over 40 years. Scott is a pacifist who has engaged in nonviolent direct actions for peace during 6 visits to Israel-Palestine since 1989. So these are the 4 presenters. We're hoping to give them about 15 minutes each or less. That'll give us a chance to have questions and answers. We hope to go until 8:15, but we could go longer till 8:30 if need arises. So I hope that's okay with everybody. We have 39 people on the call. So without further ado, Muna, would you like to present? And I'll make you the co-host so you can put your PowerPoint up.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much, Father Rocco, and thank you to Mike Moran for organizing this and for all the members of Pax Christi, Massachusetts. So nice to meet you all. So I want to mention first that this is the first time that I'm actually ever talking about my family. I'm Palestinian on my dad's side and Northern European, white American on my mother's side. So I've never spoken publicly about my family before. It is a difficult story to tell, I think. Before I start, I would say that I want to show you that the painting behind my head, my screen, is a painting by a young woman, Gazan artist, Malik Matar. So in case you ever think you can look online to get to buy some of her prints, FYI. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to show you first a photo of my family, circa about, I think about 1945. Can you see it now? Yeah. This is my family, my dad's family. Anyway, my dad's family. They're from Haifa, which is now in northern, it's in northern Israel. It was in Palestine until 1948. My grandmother was from a big family in Bethlehem that is known to live around the Church of the Nativity, and they're known for making that big clan is known for making the olive wood sculptures. So it's a whole long story about her side of the family. A lot of those people immigrated to South America or Central America around the turn of the century, and then later around 1948. But some of that group, because of the geopolitics of the region. So anyway, just to show you what a Palestinian family, they were in Haifa, 1948. I think the story, the photo tells a lot. They're all well dressed. I give a lot of credit to my grandmother, who I never met. She died in 1950, 2 years after they left Palestine and weren't able to go home. So she had 11 children. To have them all ready for a photo was pretty amazing. So so this is one Palestinian Christian family back in the day. So you can see that we were. And one thing the Palestinians, I would say, all of us are feeling very, very strongly, and it's the most hurtful thing in the world. But we have to feel in these days, in these moments of this incredible dehumanization and genocide that's going on, we have to always emphasize that we're human, which is unbelievable to have to do that we're just the same as everyone else. So I thought this picture would help, center that particular point. But and it's really I said it's a shame, but everyone is feeling like that, because there is this obviously, and I guess other people will talk about this too, but the horrific genocide going on in Gaza, and no word from any of the Western governments to make it stop. So this is can you see my PowerPoint now? Everybody can see my PowerPoint? Okay, this is sort of my little outline. So my family story, yes, they were in Haifa. The Zionist forces were coming into Haifa. It was very dangerous. There was shooting and bombs going off. And so to keep the family safe, all those children, my grandparents decided to go to Lebanon temporarily until the fighting ceased, so they would keep the children safe. And after, when the state of Israel was declared, the border closed and never able to return home. Now, they were able to return home, but of course they were Christian, and the state of Israel was founded as a Jewish state, and it needed to have it felt it needed to have a majority Jewish population. So the Palestinians who left, who were Christian or Muslim, were not allowed to go back, to their homes. So that was the ethnic cleansing of that time in 1947, 1948 is known to the Palestinians as the Nakba, or the catastrophe, but I think most of you know that background. So that's a little bit about my family. Palestinian Christians, I think worldwide, were about 20% of the population. Many in the United States, most of the Palestinians who are here are actually Christian. And we are only about, I think, 2% back now in the entirety of the Holy Land, because so many have immigrated over the years. And it was probably a little easier for Palestinian Christians to immigrate to the United States or European countries or South America because of the shared religion with the majority. A little bit about the Palestinian Christian Alliance for Peace that I'm currently a co-chair of. As Father Rocco said, we work with with interfaith groups, and we work with American churches, congregations, denominations, to try to educate them and mobilize them to work more for Palestinian rights and for freedom and justice and peace for all in the Holy Land, for all residents of the Holy Land, no matter what their religion. Okay. The next thing I thought I would just also mention that in Gaza, just in case I think everyone knows this, but there are three churches. Their main churches are the Orthodox Church of Saint Porphyrius. I don't know how to say that properly, but it was, that was bombed recently. So this is maybe old information that was sheltering, this number of people. The Holy Family Catholic Parish. So there's a Catholic community in Gaza, and there was an Anglican chapel that was within the Arab Evangelical Church, which was also bombed, which the Israelis claimed that was Hamas or Islamic Jihad rocket that misfired, but like forensic experts later just debunked that particular story. That it was that they're the kind of weaponry that Hamas has could not have done that kind of damage, and the fact that the Israelis had told the hospital administrator that they had evacuated the hospital. They told within a very short time, like just right before it was actually bombed. So, okay, now to talk a little bit about some of the media presentations that we've been seeing. Just as a reminder, just the way this in the United States, this was only in 2021, only four major corporations owned 90% of all the media, the radio stations and the television stations. So it's not that hard to have kind of a controlled narrative, and people who dissent from that or who stray, are often fired from their positions or deplatformed. You've seen that recently in several instances. Even on the right-wing media, like Tucker Carlson, for example, right, was fired recently by Rupert Murdoch, who owns Fox. So just some. Oh yes, okay. Another thing I wanted to add today. So I didn't really finish my PowerPoint. This is sort of my notes.
The PowerPoint's not up.
Oh, it's not. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Did you see the picture of my family?
We did, but then after that, I don't know if they saw anything else.
Oh, okay. There we go. Well, the PowerPoint's not that exciting. Anyway, so this is the chart of the four corporations that own 90% of the media in the United States. So just so everyone should, just a reminder that our media is corporate owned. So I want to just talk a little bit about also before I get into the media, I want to talk about two people I spoke with who were on the ground today. I called a friend in Ramallah, the West Bank, who said, that every day, and it's as horrible as it can be.
Okay.
She says horrible as it can be. She said every day and everywhere people are getting killed randomly. She said today. Sorry, someone else talking? I have a question. Oh, okay. I'm going to mute Father. Okay. So they killed in Ramallah, the Israeli army killed two people randomly. One was a 14-year-old boy who was riding his bicycle, and an employee who was leaving work, like leaving, I think, a store to go home. In the West Bank, Israeli soldiers are also stripping men naked and beating them on the ground. There was a story about that yesterday. She said they are completely using the word Hamas as an excuse to do anything. So the other person I spoke to is in East Jerusalem, talked about just the general situation. She said the Jabalia refugee camp, they bombed it the first time, and before they could even get, the survivors out or even the bodies out, the Israelis bombed it again. She said right now only 2 hospitals are operational, but that is only for a matter of time. They will completely run out of medication and fuel and in a matter of days. So She said, we talked about how the Israelis say that they won't stop before they meet their objectives. And she said, well, what are their objectives? You know, like how many people are they going to kill? And they are bombing vast areas. And it is clear that it is an ethnic cleansing war. This is what this person is, somebody I know from the YWCA, who's actually the world president. She said, well, this is just some interesting information about geopolitics. She said that the Hezbollah leader in Lebanon is going to give a speech tomorrow, and people are interested to see what he's going to say. She has been wise. She said he has been wise, though, and she doesn't think that he will, attack Israel. She said if they go to war, the region will go into war, and scary prospect, but she thinks he won't do that. She is near a refugee camp that gets attacked every other day. She said the settlers are stopping people in cars. Since October 7th, there are 1,800 new people detained, imprisoned in Israeli jails, 1,800 more Palestinians, and they've killed 300 in the West Bank, not even the Gaza Strip, which the death toll is about 9,000 right now. So she said the extent of the brutality and viciousness is unprecedented. So, and anyone who knows the situation knows that it has already been a very bad situation, extremely bad human rights situation. She said in Jenin, they've demolished homes, detained more men. Snipers are shooting people in the chest and the head. They're shooting to kill. She said everyone is living a trauma here. She said Gaza is an extreme trauma. And she said everyone who is not shot today is wondering if it will be them tomorrow, if they'll still be living tomorrow. So that's a report from the ground from people I just spoke with today. This video is from an Arab news source, but it says, let me see. Oh, let's see, the New Arab website. These were the videos that emerged on Tuesday of Israeli soldiers detaining and torturing Palestinians in the occupied West Bank. In the town of Yatta near Hebron. They're blindfolded and bound, with some naked, being beaten and dragged across the ground. Euromed Human Rights Monitor said footage showed Israeli soldiers bragging about torturing the detainees, with some of them beating with their rifle butts and trampling on detainees' heads. I did see the videos, and they are horrible. And also, Jewish Voice for Peace commented on the videos as well. And the Adamir Prisoner Support and Human Rights Association, a group based in the occupied West Bank, notes that they reflect horrifying details of systemic and intensified crimes, which are continuously escalating, reaching the point of direct threat to open fire on detainees. Also, at least 2 Palestinians have died in Israeli custody in the last week. So, okay, just to talk a little bit about, and you probably have noticed this yourself, but if you look at the mainstream media in the United States, at least, the stories are often told from the Israeli perspective. What does Israel think? What is Israel doing? Israeli people are humanized. Their stories are told, the human impact of people who, families of hostages and families of victims, which is, of course, good that the Israeli victims are, recognized in what they're going through. However, there's the same coverage is not given to the Palestinian side. In fact, sometimes the Palestinian side is only mentioned at the end as a statistic, issue framing. So, okay. A lot of times the Israeli representatives, when they're speaking being interviewed on news stations, many things that they say go unchallenged when they are saying racist things. All Palestinian speakers, the first question that they've always been asked on so many interviews, like, well, do you condemn the Hamas attacks? That was, the first thing. But the Israeli speakers weren't asked if they are condemning, the disproportionate violence toward the Palestinian civilians. The Israeli government speakers are constantly comparing Hamas to ISIS, so ISIS is already known to be a very extremist group. So sometimes there are retractions that are coming through, but they're not given the same visibility as the stories themselves, like the, beheaded babies, women being raped. Those stories turned out to be not true. So, but not many people, everybody heard those stories, but not the retractions. So it kind of gave justification, in the minds of Israelis and many Americans for this
Jan, do you still hear it?
assault. Yeah.
Oh, good.
So the demonstrations in the USA that are supporting Palestinian rights are wrongly called pro-Hamas or anti-Israeli. They really are, or they are criticizing Israeli policy, the Israeli government policy, but they are largely in support, in solidarity with the Palestinian people. The coverage has also been ahistorical, lacking context, as if the story started on, the whole story began on October 7th. There was no background about the history of the 56-year-old occupation, about the people who live in Gaza who can't leave Gaza, how it's a narrow strip of land that is entirely controlled by the Israeli military. Nobody in Gaza can leave Gaza. They can't leave even for medical treatment without getting an Israeli permit to get medical treatment. And some research I did some years ago that was done, it was a study done by UN Women looking at women with breast cancer who needed to leave to go get treatment in Jerusalem hospitals. And I think it was, I'm sorry, it was a while ago, but it was many of the women who needed permits were not given permits to leave to get medical treatment. I think it was only about 50%, but don't quote me. I can go back while someone else is speaking and double check that. And also children who need cancer treatment, they are often, they might get a permit, but maybe not one of their parents, especially their mothers, were not given permits to go with these children. Like maybe some person can go, but it has to be some distant aunt or uncle, but not the child's mother. So it's a level of cruelty is very difficult to understand. And also the very bare life conditions in Gaza, the poverty and the deprivation, and the fact that the unemployment rate is 60%. Also these periodic bombardments of Gaza. So also Palestinian sources are questioned. They're often described as the Hamas-run Ministry of Health. Even President Biden questioned the numbers provided by the Ministry of Health in Gaza. However, when Israeli sources are stated as fact, the numbers that they give are all stated as fact. So, and also media priming, in the backdrop are all,
Yes, I just did.
That exist in the United States of
Are you in?
Arabs and Muslims in the background.
Do you see me? Am I?
Yes.
Yeah. This is a very interesting case of media bias that I saw. Okay. This was from CNN, a CNN article on October 19th. Israel is at war with Hamas. Here's what to know. So, notice that the actor that they center in the story is Israel. It's not Israel and Hamas are at war. It's Israel is at war, Hamas. So the actor we're concerned with here, and the way they frame the title is Israel. So the group Hamas, like most Palestinian factions and political parties, insists, look at this is the sentence from this story that was on their website, insists that Israel is an occupying power and that it is trying to liberate the Palestinian territories. This is an example of incredible bias, because it sounds like this is like some crazy group, like some crazy idea that Hamas has, that Israel is the occupying power. That they insist that insist like somebody's insisting that that they're right about something. But this, in fact, is actually what international law states, that the UN, that the West Bank, including East Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip, are territories occupied by Israel. And in the UN nomenclature, they are considered occupied Palestinian territory, or OPT. So this is just some information on all, this is the same across the board on all United Nations websites and the International Court of Justice. So Israel itself cannot define the the status of the territories it occupies. Israel likes to call them the disputed territories, or it says that it's really their land because God gave it to them. And that is often another line you'll hear, Benjamin Netanyahu often says that this is really, it's all of the land, all of this land is for the Jewish people, God gave it to them. So, and some, and this is the extremist settlers who are in the West Bank. Many of them really believe this, that they are kind of like, seeking to purify the land. Anyway, it's really it's frightening. So maybe I should put it in slideshow mode. Might work better. Probably get a better view. Okay.
You can also put these. She's also.
Yeah. Okay. This is today's news from CNN. I just want to talk to you a little bit about the media here. This is just some headlines that I just picked up just from their website. So Israel military said it's surrounding Gaza City. Again, the first actor that is named is the Israel military. The first source that is given is Israel military. It uses a neutral verb. It's the verb said, not insisted, not claimed, anything like that said. It is surrounding Gaza City as its bombardment of the enclave intensifies, with the skies of northern Gaza illuminated by flares and explosions late Thursday night. It almost sounds like somewhat innocuous, illuminated by flares, and explosions are bad, but it doesn't really give you the picture. Israel strikes killed people sheltering at schools. It isn't really, this was just, I guess you have to click to find out, but this is on our homepage. It doesn't say how many people, it doesn't say the Palestinian people. And Gaza's hospitals say they're struggling to treat people. Yes, they know that. Okay. It is interesting that, Secretary of State Blinken said he would discuss steps Israel can and should take to minimize civilian casualties. Now, remember, the civilian casualties are already 9,000, with at least 3,500 children. I haven't checked the statistics for today. So this is a nice time, how many, 3 weeks into this, that Blinken is just, said he's going during his visit. So he's also going back and forth to Tel Aviv, showing that kind of solidarity with the Israeli government. It follows a call by US President Joe Biden for a humanitarian pause. And he doesn't talk about the people of Gaza. He says a pause to allow for the release of the hostages. So everybody knows that that there are Israeli hostages there. And of course they should be released. And of course everyone should be caring about, their well-being too. But it's interesting that this is how CNN is framing that, that this is why you would want to have a humanitarian pause. It's only to allow for the release of the hostages and not to bring in water, food, fuel, to allow electricity and in medicine for the, 2.3 million people of Gaza. So, it also kind of trains your mind to, when you read these kind of things over and over and over again, it trains you to think in these terms, to worry about a lot more about, the Israeli victims of this conflict, I guess, but and not the Palestinian people. So this is the end result, and this is why I think American people don't really understand. A lot of American people don't understand or don't get what's going on.
Munu, could you
wrap up?
Come to an end?
Yeah, so sure. My time is up. Okay. Yeah.
I don't know what to do.
Absolutely. So, okay. And I think there's anything else interesting I wanted to say. No, just about what's happening to people who speak out for Palestinian rights, the doxing, the firing, job offers rescinded, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, this was on October, I think October 19th, there was a poll of US likely voters. 66% agreed that the US should call for a ceasefire and de-escalation of violence in Gaza to prevent civilian deaths. So you just see the gap again between I was just saying the American people, but the American people in general thought a ceasefire was a good idea, but big gap between what people want and what the government is doing. And then FYI, this is the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. So genocide is, killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction. imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. There are 50,000 pregnant women in Gaza. I think 5,000 are supposed to be delivering this month, and also forcibly transferring children of the group. So if you haven't read yet the article that was by Roz Siegel in the Jewish Currents magazine, the article is entitled "A Textbook Case of Genocide." He was also interviewed on Democracy Now! I would highly recommend that you look at that article. Roz Siegel is a Holocaust and genocide studies scholar. Just to look at alternative media sources, Al Jazeera English, Democracy Now!, and look at the UN sources too. The UN Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, they have a daily news update you can sign up for. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency, I have it wrong. And the Committee for the Exercise for the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People at the UN also. And I've just noticed from listening to different media, because I'm a media buff, that there are critical voices on the left and the right about the US unconditional support for Israel. The Gray Zone is very interesting. If you look that up, Gray Zone, Max Blumenthal. Mark Lamont Hill, he has a show on Al Jazeera. Also Jimmy Dore, he's sort of like a comedian, but he also does, most of his show is serious commentary. Gary Null, he's a health nut, but he's also, he talks about health and then politics. He's also been talking about Palestine. And then Ron Paul, he's the libertarian person. Sometimes a lot of us would not ever listen, think about Ron Paul, but he's been very critical of the war, bringing interesting speakers. And even amazingly, somebody who I would never listen to, because I'm very kind of like on the progressive left side. But Tucker Carlson has also brought very critical lens to the unconditional support for Israel. So, and what is going on in Gaza. So thank you very much for your kind attention. I'll be able to answer any questions along with the other speakers later. So.
Right, and this is being recorded, so if people want to come back to the PowerPoint, it'll be on the Pax Christi, Massachusetts, the full name, YouTube channel soon. So keep your questions for the end. I'd like to invite Phil to give his sharing.
Thank you, Rocco, and thanks very much, Muna. I'm going to keep my remarks brief, just a few minutes. I'm going to speak primarily from a personal standpoint and share a couple of observations from that position. So I'm an Arab American. My father was born in Lebanon. My mother's parents were born in Lebanon. My sister married a Palestinian, and my two nephews, of course, are now half Palestinian, half Lebanese. When I went to grad school, one of the people in my cohort is a Palestinian. I invited him to come tonight. He regretfully couldn't make it, but would be interested in perhaps in future meetings. In addition to being an Arab American, I'm a Catholic Christian who follows Jesus's original teachings, and the original teachings, not the Constantinian ones. For the last 1,700 years, somehow or other, the church has twisted Jesus's teachings around to make what is evil, which is war and violence and violence and war and enmity, somehow or other has justified it. And so from my position as a Catholic Christian and as the co-chair of Pax Christi, I strongly denounce that. And part of my efforts as a Catholic Christian is to reach out not only to my senators in Massachusetts and Congress people, state reps, but also to the people who are in Congress who identify as Catholics, and calling on them to listen primarily to what Jesus taught, since you're saying that you're a Catholic, and not what human beings are teaching. So that's part of my action, but I'll speak quickly about that at the end. My late brother Simon was a Jesuit, and he traveled to the Middle East several times. He and Kathy Kelly co-founded Voices in the Wilderness, and I would assist in and I didn't go with him to Iraq, but I assisted in collecting food and medicine and toys for several of his visits. Every time, you might know this, and the reason I'm telling you this is because this seems to be an extension of that kind of genocidal policy that we had with the Iraqis. Every time that Simon and Kathy and the others from Voices in the Wilderness went to Iraq, they faced a federal penalty of 12 years in prison and $1 million fine. And they went publicly. They would announce that they were going because they were trying to get people's awareness. And what they were trying to get people to become aware of is precisely what Muna started her presentation with. He would bring back pictures of Iraqi mothers and children and them and the fathers crying over their dying and starving children. And he would ask them, what do you want me to ask Americans? What do you want to say to Americans? And the mothers often with tearing eyes would say, why do you hate us? Why are you killing us? Why do you want to kill us? Why do you hate us? And I found that to be really profoundly moving, because the strong attempt by the media has been to dehumanize Arabs. And I won't go into all of that, but there have been studies, that have been shown when you look at media representations, et cetera, it's a long, long process. And I have to say, Disney is one of the primary ones of dehumanizing Arabs, so that when it comes time to do genocide, which is what this is and what Iraq was, you put down wild dogs, right? Anytime you can dehumanize, it's much easier. And when you listened to the names that the American soldiers would call the Arab people, it was appalling. I won't repeat it. One of the times that Kathy Kelly spoke after her staying in Iraq during one of our bombings, she spoke with a couple of American soldiers, very young people, and they finally entered into Baghdad. This was during one of the ground assaults. And Kathy said to us, she said, these kids were just absolutely pale. And when they found out that Kathy was an American, they ran up to her and they couldn't wait to tell her the story of what they had been ordered to do. And what they were ordered to do as they were marching through from Saudi Arabia all the way up through to, Baghdad, they killed an entire village of people. And he said, we were using 50 caliber machine guns. Now, the caliber of a 50 is like this. And they were ordered to kill every human being that moved. So the indiscriminate killing that we're seeing that's happening with Israel now is something that has happened in Iraq. And many of us have been here today. We're protesting that. And I was talking with Jan earlier last week, and we were saying that, geez, if only Americans knew, they would sort of wake up and they would say, we have to put an end to this particular kind of killing of innocents. And I hope that's true. But during all my work in the anti-war of Iraq, the United States, as a result of our draconian sanctions and the fact that our bombs intentionally blew up all their food storage plants, and we absolutely destroyed their water purification, so that they had no way, and they were importing 90+% of everything. They had no way, everything was blocked, so they had no way of replenishing any of this. So the geostatistics were that every day, 240 children in Iraq died of conditions that they would not have otherwise died from as a result of the conditions that we had on them. So 240 children a day, every day, for month upon month upon month. Million. And as pointed out, we weren't concerned. As a matter of fact, the American officials said, we don't really concern ourselves with Iraqi casualties. So I'm just trying to point out the parallel that this kind of action in the Middle East, the groundwork has been laid. This kind of genocide has happened. I don't think that has been brought to the world attention as well, even though there was a war crimes tribunal in Manhattan in the early 1990s that I attended. And former U.S. Attorney General Ramsey Clark was the lead person there. And my brother Simon and I attended that and stayed there for 9 hours and listened to story after story. And that's why it's so important for us to go beyond the mainstream media and to really listen to what the lived experiences of people there. And of course, Ramsey Clark called our stuff in Iraq, our actions in Iraq, a genocide. He wasn't the only one, and we're certainly witnessing another genocide now. Personally, I'm devastated by what's happening. I find myself really grappling against despair. What I think is happening now is akin to the white supremacy that has been on an upsurge in our country. It's apartheid. It's been called apartheid in Israel. I think we can call it Israeli supremacy. And if you look at the laws, right, of what any Jew can go and call himself a Jewish citizen by going to Israel, go to Israel. But certainly, as we know, no Arabs can't do that, even if they were born there. So what I would like to do is point out one more thing, and that is something I'll circle back to the beginning. Jesus saw that there was evil in the world. And as a Christian, and I know not everybody's a Christian, but I'm just speaking from my own position. As a Christian, I really believe that I need to work as hard as I can to follow Jesus's model and words. And even though there are human beings who are very intelligent, who've kind of done these logical pretzels and come up with just war theory, just revolution theory, whatever else, or this is a just war. I want to drive home the part that war is evil. And I heard that mentioned once in any commentary, that war is evil. And so the question is, how do we resist evil? What do we do? Do we bring greater evil to it? And I don't think that is what I'm called to do. I think we need to take action. Pax Christi USA has on its website a number of actions that it suggests. And I will continue to speak out to our Catholic leaders and to the people who, in the church, and say that, as a follower of Jesus, I'm bound to confront this kind of evil in a way that is more in line with creative nonviolence. And I would urge an immediate ceasefire to attend to the humanitarian needs of all the people within the war-torn situation. So I want to keep it brief tonight, so I'm just going to stop there, and we'll invite feedback and discussions later on. So thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you very much. Please note in the chat, there is a website for Munu's organization, as well as an update from today from the UN Office of Coordination for Humanitarian Affairs. So Jan has joined us finally, successfully. So Jan, I'm going to let you speak.
Thanks, Rocco. I have to apologize for coming late. I spent all day preparing for this talk, and when I tried to get on at 6 o'clock, nothing worked, but some angel, someplace allowed me on. So I appreciate being here with all of you. I'm going to have 3 main points. At this point, you hear people saying that the situation in Gaza and Palestine is complicated. And yeah, that's what the media seems to say. That's what even our top government officials say. But it is not that complicated to achieve peace between Israelis and Palestinians. And that's going to be my 3 main points. So, from what I've read, from what I've listened to about this, from good people, from people who know, there are 2 essential and reasonable steps that we can work toward to achieve peace in Palestine, Israel. The first comes from a talk I heard by Norman Finkelstein. He's a brilliant Jewish educator, and his quote is, "As soon as the United States stops giving all funding to Israel, peace will be achieved within a year." Peace will be achieved within a year. Okay, I'll get back to that in a minute. The second, not very complicated, reasonable step toward peace between Palestine and Israel, the Israeli occupation must end with the two-state solution. Okay, you can all read about this two-state solution. You probably have talked a lot about it, but until now, all peace negotiations failed because Israel demands control of most of the drinking water and most of the farmable land. And remember, they are illegally occupying land that belongs to the Palestinians. So you can get an in-depth history of the two-state solution on the Britannica website, Britannica. I think there's two T's in there, Britannica website. And remember, just a quote that I heard this week, 94% of the water in Gaza is undrinkable. They have to bring it in jugs. And a lot of the disease in Gaza is a result of the undrinkable water. So that brings me to my third point after the two essential steps that we can take. What can you do? That's my point here. What can you, as Pax Christi, as residents, citizens of this country? The real complication, now this is, remember, I said the other two issues were not complicated. The real complication is within our own country. Americans need to be educated about the facts, the true facts that Muna was talking about in Palestine and Israel. So Rocco is going to show you how much of our tax dollars have been given to Israel. Okay, this is from the website If Americans Knew, which is the most important thing right now. We Americans must be educated. And you people watching this webinar, I'm hoping that one result of watching tonight is you will start reaching out to people that you know. So let's take a look. Oh, Rocco, this is the first page. This isn't the tax dollars page. Can you get the tax dollars page?
Where do I find that?
Remember I told you, okay, hit under US tax, see in the blue line? Okay, US taxes. Try the first one. Okay, so this is the amount of money that the United States, with your tax dollars, has given to Israel. So as you can see, $13.1 million in military aid per day, not total, per day, is given. But it gives Palestinians a tiny amount. Keep going down, scroll down, Rocco. Okay, now, wait, under the red, just under the red, go up to the red bar, up a little bit further, to right there. So the House committees right now have just passed, what, $20 million per day to Israel, okay? If you go on this website, ifamericansknew.org, just look at these two pages. This page about taxes, your tax dollars, my tax dollars. Okay, so my daughters have decided this year that instead of giving material Christmas gifts, we are going to donate the amount of money that we spend, and my daughter spent a lot of money, but not this year on me. They're going to give it to If Americans Knew for the information sheets that If Americans Knew puts out, and the billboards that as donations come into If Americans Knew, billboards to educate Americans are going up, and they've been very, very effective. Now, Rocco, let's go to the statistics. I just want to.
Where is that?
Yes, that's
Yep.
on the first page, the home page. Home page. Okay, so the first one, I'm just going to draw your fast attention to. Please go and look at this a little bit later. This is the daily U.S. aid to Israel and Palestine, and you can compare it. The blue obviously is Israel, the red is Palestine. The next one is how many Israelis and Palestinians have been killed from September of 2000 to the present. Take a look at the numbers killed, the proportions. I can't read it. Is it 19,921 Palestinians have been killed since September of 2000. 19,000. My taxes have been going to do this. The next one, Israelis, okay. Oh, this is by rocket attacks and airstrikes, same thing. Only Palestinians are shown here. The next one is how many children have been killed from September 2000 to currently. 2,434, and you know darn well that with the Gaza attacks, so many more children have been killed. And then the next one is the deaths between both populations. Sure looks like Israeli deaths were reported on a rate of 4 times greater. Okay, but we know that's a lie. So, okay, the next one, I'll take a look at that one later. The next one is the UN resolutions. This is very important to look at. I think a lot of you watching right now know about the resolutions that Israel agreed to in the very beginning and then totally broke. The next one is the number of political prisoners and detainees. Right now, they say there's 5,200 Palestinians in Israeli jails. And then the demolitions of Israeli and Palestinian homes. The Palestinians keep getting, their homes are demolished. They keep building and they're demolished again and again and again. Okay, so that's the next one is unemployment rates, but the next most important one is how many illegal settlements on the other land. There's no illegal settlements on Israel's land, but Palestine owns the land that Israel is illegally occupying. And you can see the famous loss of land, of Palestinian land in that bottom green 4. Okay, so you can take down that website, Rocco. But that is Alison Weir, who is the leader, the person who has done most of the work for If Americans Knew. Okay, so I'm motivated because of what you've just seen. My taxes are going to contribute to the deaths of all the children in Gaza, the children in Palestine, and the adults. And the ones who survive, which brings me to another important point, the ones who are survive almost always have multiple PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. There's a lot about this online. I won't go into too many details because I want to leave time for questions afterwards, but I want to make one last important point. When I say it's not that complicated to achieve peace in Israel and Palestine, take a look at the geographical facts. Gaza is the size of a town in Massachusetts. That town is Plymouth. That's how small Gaza is. And Israel is small too. Most of us know that Israel is the size of New Jersey. Now, I hope in your comments afterwards that you can see that these tiny pieces of land are not complicated to deal with if Americans knew the facts. Okay, so my endpoints are simply know that the context of October 7th came from the PTSD that every person in Palestine has experienced, the post-traumatic stress. They aren't terrorists. They are freedom fighters, in my mind. Now, can you, one thing I'd like to hear in the comments afterwards from you is, what are the ideas that you would like to promote to Americans who do not know the facts about Palestine, Israel? I will suggest from my own experience, one is to start discussion groups. I've done several, they work out wonderfully. And I can help anybody if anybody wants to know how to get a discussion group going. The last thoughts. If you do really get involved in this issue of peace for Palestine and Israel, you are going to find that an awful lot of people are confused. Many more are angry. And you're going to get some anger. But maybe remember the words that are attributed to Jesus. Prophets are scorned in their own time. You are prophets when you speak the truth about Israel and Palestine. People do not want to hear it, but people did not want to hear the prophets from the Bible. So, one last point. This book is what I teach from. It's called Steadfast Hope, The Quest for a Just Palestinian Peace. I have put out a piece of information at the last Pax Christi assembly. About 15 people signed up. I will be offering a Zoom 4-session series of discussions based on reading this book. If anybody's interested, I'll give you my email address, and that is if Americans knew .ne for New England at Comcast.net. So that's if Americans knew .ne at Comcast.net. If you'd like to talk to me, start a discussion group, or participate in the Zoom for Steadfast Hope. God bless you all.
Thank you very much, Jan. It's obvious that we're going to go till 8:30. We'll have Scott give his presentation now, and then we'll have questions and answers afterwards. Without further ado, Scott. Scott, could you unmute yourself?
There it is. Okay, all set. Well, I'm just going to tell you two personal stories. The first is I first went to Israel-Palestine in 1989 as a member of a human rights observation team. There were 16 of us, several Jews, one Muslim, some secular people, and some Christians. And we each got to go to a place of our own choice for 15 days and then 15 in another location. And I chose to go to Gaza for my first 15 days. And I went to the Rafah refugee camp, which is in the southernmost part of Gaza. I found it incredibly crowded. Most of the people who lived there were forcibly displaced by the creation of the state of Israel in 1948, fled to that area, lived in a refugee camp, and then were conquered by Israel in the 1967 war. Their lives were very, very difficult. I stayed with a Palestinian teacher of literature, and I looked forward to meeting other Palestinians and collecting affidavits about human rights abuses and to observe things. And the first night that I was there, unbeknownst to me, many of the Palestinians worked inside Israel in manual labor. I learned while I was there that in Israel, they refer to manual labor as Arab work. It's kind of a pejorative, and Israeli Jews will not do street cleaning, garbage collection, and construction work. So they hired some of the Palestinians who drove in buses to work for minimal wages inside Israel. And under Israeli law, these workers had to return to Gaza every day. But it was a 3-hour commute, and many of the poorest workers would camp on the construction sites on the weekdays and then come back on the weekend. Unbeknownst to me, the first night I was in Rafah, several of these Palestinians that were sleeping in a tool shed were discovered by Israeli zealots. The building was doused with gasoline and they were burned alive. And the next morning, when I woke up, the Israelis thought when news reached Rafah that these 3 young men from Rafah had been burned alive, that there would be riots. So they sent riot troops to the marketplace. When word hit town, several teenagers threw stones at the soldiers, and the Israelis opened fire and wounded 23 people and killed 3 of them, including a grandfather on a donkey cart with his 2 grandkids. Immediately, helicopters appeared overhead. They began dropping tear gas canisters all over the refugee camp. Jeeps began charging through the street, firing in all directions, and loudspeakers announced it was a curfew. Now, my understanding of a curfew is after a certain hour, you can't go outside. No, an Israeli curfew is more strict. You have to go in your home. If you look out your window and you can be seen by an Israeli soldier, you can be shot. So people who had shutters shuttered their windows, pulled down the blinds, and we hunkered down. A few minutes later, we heard screams in the building next door to us. An Israeli soldier was seen by a doctor in the house where I was staying, firing a tear gas canister through the shuttered window. And tear gas is very bad outside. I've experienced a number of times, but indoors it's extremely dangerous. And the family was screaming. The doctor jumped out of our house, and at risk to himself, he knocked down the front door and came back a few minutes later with 2 teary children, and then went back a second time and came back with an infant who was dead. Then he went back into the house one last time, came back with the metal tear gas canister. He slapped it into my hands. He says, "This is yours." And I saw on the tear gas canister, it said Salzburg Laboratories, made in the USA, Salzburg, Pennsylvania. It said in capital letters, "For outdoor use only. Indoor use may cause injury or death." I was stunned. And I called Joel Brinkley, who was the New York Times bureau chief in Jerusalem. I told him I was a human rights observer, and I had just witnessed an Israeli soldier kill a 6-month-old Palestinian. And he said to me, "How long have you been here?" I said, "Less than 24 hours. He said, "I've been here 20 years. Let me tell you something. What you saw was not news." He said, "It happens every day." I'll tell you what's news. Last week, 3 Palestinians were bulldozed alive when an Israeli military bulldozer plowed dirt over them and killed them. That was news because it's different. And I said to him, "Well, Mr. Brinkley, you're experienced and I'm not. But let me ask you 2 questions. One is, if the 6-month-old I saw killed today was Jewish, would it have been news then?" He said nothing. And then I said to him, now, if it happens every day, don't you think if the New York Times printed it every day, we might have a different foreign policy? Again, he did not answer me. My second location that I stayed in during my tour was in the West Bank. I went to the outskirts of Hebron. Hebron is an interesting city in the West Bank because that's where the tomb of the prophet Abraham is. And it's the only place that I know of in the world where there is a synagogue and a mosque in the same building, because both communities honor the prophet Abraham. Anyway, when I went to visit a family, Atta Jaber. He's a farmer with 8 children. His family, according to him, had lived on this farm and in this particular house for at least 20 generations that he could trace back. The house was backed up against a stone wall and a cave. And he said the family always used the cave to store goods in the hot weather. And he showed this whole thing with a lot of pride. Well, in 1967, they were occupied by the Israelis. And in 1967, the first Jewish settlement was created outside Hebron. It's called Kiryat Arba. When that settlement was built, they seized a third of Atta Jaber's land, chopped down the olive trees, which can live to be 2,000 years old, and then immediately began harassing Atta to try to get him to leave. When I visited in 1989, 2 days earlier, Jewish settlers had come to their home and burned two of the only 2 family cars. I saw the wreckage of the cars in the yard. And then the settlers attacked the houses and broke all the windows. Atta's 2-year-old child was sleeping by the window and got shards of glass in her eyes. But the cars were burned. He had to carry the child 10 miles to the hospital. The doctors could not restore her sight because the delay had been too long, so she was blinded in one eye. I went back to visit. I visited Atta for a period of time, and then I went back to the United States. Before I've made my second trip to the area, the Oslo Accords were signed, and I had hoped things would get better. And I went to visit Atta again, and Atta said that he had finished a full crop of tomatoes ready to go to market, and the Israeli military had blocked the roads for 3 weeks, closed with a closed road, so he couldn't deliver any of his vegetables. The entire crop rotted. And then after the Oslo Accords, people had thought things would get better, but Jewish settlements exploded in the West Bank. And then an American from Brooklyn named Baruch Goldstein decided to go to Israel, declared himself a citizen, moved to Kiryat Arba settlement, and then took 2 assault rifles and walked into the mosque at the site of Abraham's tomb, walked into the mosque during services and fired and killed 29 Palestinians and wounded 120 more, until surviving members of the congregation wrestled him and they actually beat him to death. In the aftermath of this massacre, Palestinians demanded justice and actions against the settlement. Palestinians who were demonstrating, 7 of them were shot and killed, and the Israelis declared a curfew on the whole West Bank. No Israeli settler was prosecuted, and the Palestinians say they were punished for the crime of being massacred. I visited Atta 2 years later, and he was excited to have his son married. He built a house for his son and his new daughter-in-law on his land. And the Palestinians were like old Italian families. Everybody lives together. You know, you build upstairs, they live together. And 6 weeks later, when the couple was out shopping, 2 Jewish settlers went into the house and declared it unoccupied. Under Israeli law, if a Jew can go into a building and there are no tenants, they can declare it Jewish property and former ownership is forfeit. The family sued to get the house back from the Jewish Supreme Court, And in a surprise, over 2 years, over 6 months, they agreed that they could have the house back. But before the settlers turned the house back, it had been 3 days before my visit at this point, they burned the olive trees, they peed on the floors, they used human excrement to write obscenities on the wall, and they poisoned the well. I went into the house and saw this destruction. The Atta Jaber's family knew the names of the Jewish settlers, gave it to the police. No Israeli was charged with any crime. I visited Atta 2 years after this, and when I got there, all of their irrigation equipment had been removed and the crops were rotting. And Atta said to me, I never did anything against the Israeli government. All the land is not for the Palestinians or the Israelis. It's God's land. We are guests here. I find I need an easier life for me and my children, a life of peace, without confiscations, attacks in the night, without hate in the heart. And I just want to say one last thing. At the end of one of my trips, I had a meeting with a member of the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, a very progressive member of the Knesset. And I asked him, what would bring peace here? And he said to me, listen, if your Congress had hearings about cutting U.S. aid, I'm not talking about a vote, he says hearings, there would be peace tomorrow at 12 noon. He said, we know where our bread is buttered. He said, but to tell you the truth, we feel we have total license to do anything we want. Some people say Israel is the 51st U.S. state, but we say no, it's an extension of the occupied territories. We say to the U.S., give us $1 billion and go to hell. President Biden in the last few days has said several times he wants a ceasefire. He wants, maybe we should discuss the two-state solution. The Israelis didn't even waste a moment thinking about it. The government rejected both things out of hand. And now Congress will send over $1 billion in extra money to Israel. It's absolutely mind-boggling and inconceivable. I, as a peace activist, spent time in Bosnia during that war. I was in that horrible, horrible conditions in Bosnia, and I went to Darfur, Sudan. And in both cases where there was ethnic cleansing against Africans in Darfur and against Catholics and Muslims in Bosnia, our government stood strongly against genocide and did not fund the genociders. Only in Israel-Palestine have I seen people thrown from their lands, thrown from their houses, tortured, imprisoned without charge, beaten and mistreated and degraded on U.S. tax dollars. This has to stop. This has to stop. This is unconscionable, and the rest of the world not only disapproves, but we lose standing in the world. They think less of us. It hurts us as Americans. It has to stop. Thanks be to God. I have many Jewish friends, and there are many Jewish activists who say the same thing. People that revere Judaism, they say the exact same thing. It has to stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. It is 8:18. We'll go till 8:30. If people have questions, I think if you go on the bottom of your screen as reactions, I think you can raise your hand, as I did here. Yes, Jan.
I gave the wrong email address. If anybody wants to contact me, it's a Gmail address, not Comcast.
Oh,
Thank you.
welcome.
Oh, I wanted to mention, I put a lot of resources in the chat for if you want to get more news about this beyond the mainstream media. And in addition to the wonderful sources that Jan mentioned, you know, the If Not Now If Americans Knew website. Yeah. If Not Now is a good organization too. That's one of the leading Jewish peace organizations, along with Jewish Voice for Peace, which has been tremendous in leading the call for ceasefire, including the giant demonstration, which you probably heard about in Grand Central Station last Friday, with many Jewish Voice for Peace activists getting arrested too.
Any particular questions? I can't find the second screen. Yes, Phil.
So I want to thank everybody for being here, and I want to thank those who spoke. But I also am really interested in the reactions of others, and I know that the limits of time will not allow us to hear from people. Maybe people need to percolate a little bit more before they could sort of speak. But I was going to put out to this group, is there something that we could do collectively that anybody could think of? And is there a need or a reason for us to meet again in a period of time for whatever reason? In other words, it feels like this is going to go on for a while. I also know from my own peace work that if I feel like I'm alone, it's easy to kind of get, dismissed by others. But if we do things as a community, it adds a strength. So I was just wondering, does anybody have any ideas about any communal effort or any future meeting and or support in the future for our efforts?
I'm open to meeting again if people have questions, like in about 3 weeks or so.
Tess has a comment. Tess, you have to unmute, Tess.
All right. Good evening. Thanks, Rocco, and Muna, and Jan, and everyone. Thank you so much for the way you laid out the different parts of it. And yes, I would like to, some first. We don't know how long it's going to go on, but for me, this is helpful to have a group like this. And I know some of my other friends are on here too, and there's some others who could not make it tonight. So I'm glad that it's, we have access to the video. 2 things I was wondering, on Saturday at Pax Christi, there was a brief video of a gentleman who himself was a Holocaust survivor, and he spoke about his visit to the occupied area and how he cried for days and weeks after when he saw the dehumanization. And I think that if you could put that in the chat, if it's possible, that maybe for people who are not aware of that, okay. I think what Jan was saying, what people need to know and to just talk about it. Another group is TRUA, T''Rua, RUAH. It's a rabbinical call to human rights, and it's a lot of rabbis and others are involved in it, and it's looking at human rights and justice for Israelis and Palestinians. And again, along with Jewish Voice for Peace, or also J Street, but just to get it's good for us to be able to share this information maybe with other people. As Muna pointed out, how the media is biased and the words that are used. Like my pastor on Sunday even just said, we call people barbarians, but we're all human beings. Some people are doing barbaric acts, and some things that were done were horrendous, but also what's happening now. And, when we talk about children, babies, it's everyone who's suffering, all the mothers, all the grandmothers. So thank you for tonight. And yes, I appreciate if we have some continuity here. Thank you.
The program. Can you put that? The program of last.
You have that link for that video, Rocco?
Well, you can find it on the video on the Pax Christi, Massachusetts website, because we have the whole video on. Just scroll to that spot. Phil would probably have that.
Yeah, it was like right at lunchtime that you all showed it. So for anybody who didn't see, if you want to scroll through the Pax Christi.
Sure.
To when they're breaking for lunch.
Okay. Pat?
Yeah, just in reference to what Sister Tess was looking for, there was actually the video that we saw was, I think, 7 minutes, and today I did a little. His last name is Mate, Mate, and I don't have it with me, but there is an excellent 37-minute video that I watched today, YouTube video, which broadens the context and is very worthwhile seeing. So I don't know how to get that information to you because I don't have it in front of me. Maybe I can find it. Scott, do you have it?
Yeah, if you find it, then put it on the chat.
Yeah.
Muna, did you have something to say?
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to say, if you haven't already contacted your congressperson and 2 senators, that is essential. That is a really important thing to do as soon as like tomorrow, to tell them you insist that they call for an immediate ceasefire and full access for humanitarian, to all the humanitarian aid agencies to Gaza. Like that, you should do every day until there's a ceasefire, because every day that there's not a ceasefire, hundreds of people are getting killed, including like 60% of whom are women and children. So that would be one thing. I love Bob's idea in the chat to have a group go in person to the offices of Senator Markey and Senator Warren as well. So
just to let people know, here in Worcester, my wife met with 14 others, including 3 Muslims and 4 Jewish people, with Congressman McGovern yesterday here in Worcester. And they submitted to him petitions from over 3,000 constituents calling for a ceasefire. And he posed for a photo, not another penny, not another dime for Israeli military killing of Palestinian families. And he agreed to join the resolution. But the Massachusetts delegation is not united. Representative Auchincloss is terrible on this issue. Terrible. He speaks like the Palestinians aren't even human beings.
Right.
At a number of locations, he's awful. Those of you, the constituents, please, you need to put pressure on him. I know he's a veteran, but his expression on this issue is ghastly and very cold-hearted and very, very racist, really, quite frankly.
Yes.
And we have to watch the press quite carefully. As Muna was saying, the New York Times had an article a few days ago, a front page article about, not front page, it was deep in the paper, but it was about progressives criticizing President Biden. And they said the progressives were concerned about what they call the oppression of Palestinians. Not, Human Rights Watch, the UN, Amnesty International, the Rabbis for Human Rights, all kinds of Jewish and international human rights groups have been calling it oppression for 75 years. And the New York Times puts it conditional. They wouldn't dare say the so-called Holocaust.
yeah.
We have to really watch the press and challenge them at every point when they use this kind of a slanted and dishonest reporting. I sent a letter to the Times, which they did not print, but that's really appalling. And it wasn't in an op-ed, it was in a news story. That's where we have to really be especially careful, because it's not even presented as somebody's opinion, that reporters are tainting information.
Thank you, Scott. Barbara, you have a question.
I think it's extremely unfortunate that we have this wave of anti-Semitism going across the country and across the world at the same time as we know that Israel is doing these horrible genocidal things to the Palestinians. And it seems that anyone who criticizes Israel it becomes part of the anti-Semitic movement. The criticism of Israel is conflated with anti-Semitism, and it's extremely unfortunate and tragic, because we have to be able to criticize Israel without being considered anti-Semitic. And I wonder if any of our speakers can speak to that.
Well, the Palestinians are Semites too, you know.
Mhm.
And even with those stories, it's important to look. People have been fired from their jobs, dropped from their companies, not in the United States, all over the country in different places. Groups have been kicked off campuses and criticized, not because they're Jewish, because they're supporting Palestinian rights.
Right.
The press is stressing the rise in anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish attacks, but the reality is quite complicated. And also, when you're obviously old enough to remember in the 60s, when the civil rights movement became really, really pressed, Americans felt they could have no truck with the whites at all, and they did use violence against white people. But to a certain extent, when you crush people for generation after generation, it's very difficult not to experience the anger of people. And it's very, very difficult, and it's hard, and it takes people with great courage, like Jewish Voice for Peace and others, who stand up and say, no, this is not the way we are. This is not what Judaism is about. This is, for crying out loud, Jesus says, you have heard it said, an eye for an eye, tooth for tooth, but I say to you, well, an eye for an eye, if you understand Jewish law, that was meant to moderate violence, not to give license to killing. And an eye for an eye would be 1,400 dead Palestinians, not 10,000, and maybe 100,000 before it's over. So we are in a mafia world. And yes, there's going to be anger, especially towards synagogues that hold meetings and only talk about the hostages and not the other victims. There's going to be anger. If those pictures on the streets that are being torn down showed the hostages and the dead Palestinian children as well, and said no violence, no harm to children at all, nobody would tear them down. But they tear them down because they're only emphasizing one people, and they're using the suffering of the one people to justify the violence of their particular group. And that's unacceptable. And we have to confront that. And when people say, because our city spoke against the violence against the Palestinians, she was attacked in a newspaper article as making anti-Semitic comments. She had tape recorded her entire text so she could refute it. But that accusation was reported in the front page of the newspaper because the people can say it. They can say it with no support whatsoever. After I gave a presentation once, a Holy Cross professor circulated a Jewish professor circulated an announcement that I had defended the killing of a 6-month-old Israeli child. I called him and said, what are you talking about? He said, you didn't mention it in your talk. I said, I wasn't aware for it. I opened my talk with praying at a pizza parlor, which had been 13 Israeli Jews had been killed by a suicide bomber. I said, I made it clear I was opposed to that. And they said, well, you didn't mention the other thing, so that means you're an anti-Semite. And my own alma mater has not had me back to speak since that accusation. It's 18 years. I used to speak 2 or 3 times a year at Holy Cross. So it's a powerful charge, but it's an erroneous one. And we have to continue to persist. We have to continue to quote Jewish sources, Norman Finkelstein and other good friends. We have to continue to go forward and call the people of Israel, just like the prophets did over and over, away from ungodly behavior towards their true self. God created them to be saints and good people.
Yeah. I think we read, sorry, may I add something?
Quick.
Sorry. Oh, okay. I just wanted to add to what Scott said. I think that we do, anti-Semitism is a real thing. It's a serious problem that we should take seriously. Nobody should be discriminated against because of the Jewish faith, of course. But the charge of anti-Semitism has been weaponized, though, to silence people who speak out for Palestine. And I think that we need to, rally around people and support each other, not allow this to occur. There is also, a rise in Islamophobia. You all know about the 6-year-old Palestinian Muslim boy who was stabbed to death by his landlord in Chicago. And the woman, like 2 days ago, the Muslim woman who was also killed 2 days ago in Houston, and another Palestinian man, I can't remember which part of the country, who was run over because he was Palestinian. I also wanted to point out, you wouldn't be accused of Islamophobia if you criticize the policies of Saudi Arabia, or you wouldn't be accused of being of anti-Asian hate if you criticize the policies of China. So, we're criticizing the policies of a government. That is what we are, and that is up for criticism. That's our right to criticize the policies of a government. So.
With that, I think we're going to have to bring our evening to a close. Again, I'd like to thank all those panelists who presented some very sobering information, powerful information. Mike, do we have the emails of all that were on tonight?
We do, Rocco.
Okay, so a small committee will probably huddle to find out next steps. And if we want to go forward on a occasional touchdown, as Phil was talking about, we'll get back to you on that. This video will be on the Pax Christi, Massachusetts, all written out, YouTube channel very, very soon.
Yeah.
So again,
Oh, I'm sorry, Tessa had her hand up. I don't know if it's possible that I spoke before.
Just thank you, Muna. Just briefly, Rocco, I'm wondering if Jan, when we send out the email, it's just if people need them, we just put the UN resolutions, like I go back to resolution 242, and we kind of like threw that out the window long ago, but it would be good maybe just to put that in if people need that. And also we talk about the Oslo Accords, and I mean, it wasn't perfect, but we made it through with the Good Friday Accords for Ireland, and why can't we follow through to a two-state solution?
Yeah.
So I just think maybe if we could get some of those links would be helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, everybody have a pleasant night. Thank you very, very, very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rocco.
Blessings. Thank you so
Bye-bye
much.